Jonas sat in the alien council chamber trying not to fidget with his hands. His chair felt too large, as if it had been built for someone taller, stronger, more important than him. The walls around him glowed with a faint silver light, alive, with symbols that moved and shifted like water. The Zerthi did not use wood or stone, not like humans. Their halls were grown from crystal and light, and standing inside them felt less like entering a building and more like stepping into the heart of a living star. He was the only human in the room. The others, those tall, silver-skinned figures, with eyes like liquid glass, watched him in silence. Their faces were beautiful and terrifying at the same time, flawless like statues, but with a depth in their gaze that made him feel as though they could peel back his skin and see the frightened man inside. Jonas knew he didn't belong here. He was no ambassador, no seasoned diplomat. He was just an assistant, a translator who had been pushed forward when the real envoy fell sick. The mission was important. Humanity's first real chance to build a bridge with the Zerthi. And here, he was, a boy from Earth who had barely survived language school, expected to carry words heavy enough to bend history. At the center of the chamber stood Lyra, Ambassador Lyra, as the humans called her. But the Zerthi never used such titles. Among her kind, she was simply chosen voice. She was tall, her silver skin catching the light in ripples like liquid metal. Her robe shimmered in soft hues of violet and blue, and her every movement seemed too graceful to belong to flesh and bone. Her presence calmed the others, commanding silence without effort. Jonas had studied her face in the briefing papers. He knew her history, her victories, her reputation for patience. But none of that prepared him for the moment he actually looked at her. It hit him like a strike to the chest. She's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The thought escaped him before he realized it had formed. It was not words spoken aloud, not something he meant to share. It was only his heart whispering to itself, a fragile, unguarded wonder at a being so far beyond him. And then, silence. The chamber froze. Every Zerthi turned their luminous eyes toward him. Jonas felt his stomach drop as if the floor had vanished beneath him. His mouth went dry, his heartbeat roaring in his ears. He had forgotten. He had completely forgotten. The Zerthi were not like humans. They were low-grade telepaths. They did not hear every stray thought, no. But when emotions surged strong, when the heart shouted instead of whispering, the thought spilled like a scream in a quiet room. And Jonas's admiration, his awe, his stupid, reckless wonder had been a scream. Ambassador Lyra's gaze locked on him. She did not look angry. She did not look surprised. Her face was unreadable, still as the crystal walls, yet something behind her eyes shifted, like a ripple moving, beneath the surface of a deep lake. Jonas's breath caught in his throat. He tried to speak, to explain, to pull the words back into his chest where they belonged. But the chamber's silence was heavy, pressing, unyielding. It was the silence of judgment. For one brief, terrifying moment, Jonas wished he could claw the thought from his own head, erase it, pretend it had never existed. He was only human, fragile, clumsy, unworthy. He had not meant to place his heart on display before creatures who measured thoughts as carefully as humans measured treaties. Yet it was too late. The words were not his anymore. They had been caught by her. And in the stillness of that chamber, with 100 eyes burning into him, Jonas felt something shift, something that would not be undone. What had been a private thought was no longer private. And though he did not yet understand it, though fear burned in his chest, that single moment would bind his fate to hers, and his people's fate to hers, in a way no one could have prepared for. The air inside the chamber grew heavy, so heavy, Jonas felt he could hardly breathe. He had not spoken aloud, yet the Zerthi council looked at him as if he had shouted a vow. The faint silver glow of the walls dimmed as though even the chamber itself was holding its breath. Jonas's chest tightened. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the chair, to take back the thought that had slipped out. But thoughts could not be unsaid. Not here. Not among them. He forced himself to look up, and his eyes met Lyra's. Her face was calm, almost too calm, like the surface of a frozen lake. There was no anger there, no smile either, only a stillness that frightened him more than shouting would have. The Zirthi were not like humans. They did not laugh nervously. They did not stumble over apologies. When silence fell among them, it was not awkward. It was sacred. A silence from the Zirthi meant something had changed, and Jonas knew it was because of him. His hands shook in his lap. Idiot, he told himself. Stupid, clumsy idiot. He had come here to speak for his people, to show them that humanity could be respectful, careful, worthy of trust. And in the very first moment, he had let his heart betray him. He thought of Earth. He thought of the millions who waited for news of peace, of the leaders who had trusted him to carry their words. He thought of his family back home, proud that he was part of something so great. And now, with one stray thought, he might have ruined everything. Still, no one spoke. The eldest of the council shifted in his seat, the sound of crystal brushing crystal. His eyes glowed faintly, fixed on Jonas. The weight of that gaze pressed down harder than gravity. Jonas lowered his eyes, unable to bear it. But Lyra did not look away. She stepped forward slowly, her silver robe flowing like water. Each step echoed faintly against the crystal floor. Jonas felt the pressure of her presence not only in sight but in his mind, like a faint breeze brushing across the edges of his thoughts. She did not enter his mind fully, but he could feel her standing at the border, listening, weighing. She knows. The thought made him dizzy. He wanted to speak, to apologize, but his tongue felt heavy, frozen. The silence stretched, longer and longer, until his heart thudded painfully against his ribs. Then something strange happened. He felt her presence grow sharper for a moment, like a fingertip touching glass. Her thoughts brushed his, not words, not pictures, only a soft pressure, a question without sound. It was the first time he had ever felt a mind touch his own, and though it lasted only a second, it left him shaken. He wanted to recoil, to close, himself off, but another part of him wanted to lean closer, but then just as quickly she withdrew. The silence deepened once again. The council watched. Lyra stood unmoving. Jonas sat trembling, every nerve in his body alive with shame and fear. His world, a thought like his, was harmless. To admire someone's beauty was natural, simple. But here it felt like he had committed a crime, or worse, spoken a vow he could never fulfill. His throat ached. His eyes stung. Say something, he begged himself. Anything. But what words could fix this? How could he explain that it was only wonder, not something more, that he had not meant to shout it into their sacred silence? Still, no words came, only the pounding of his heart, only the echo of his own thought burning in his chest. And as the silence held, as the Zirthi stared, Jonas realized something terrible. They were not waiting for him to explain. They were waiting for something else. Something larger. Something he could not yet see. The chamber had changed, and he was at the center of it. And the silence, the endless, unbearable silence, was not a pause. It was a verdict waiting to fall. The silence broke, not with a whisper, but with a voice like thunder rolling through glass. The human has proposed. The words came from the eldest Zirthi, his voice deep and resonant, each syllable striking the air like a bell. His silver form shifted as he rose from his seat, tall and commanding, his glass-like eyes fixed on Jonas. Proposed? Jonas's breath caught in his throat. The word struck him harder than any insult, harder than any accusation could have. Proposed? What did that mean here? He hadn't proposed anything. He hadn't even spoken aloud. All he had done was admire, a simple human thought, and now the entire council believed it meant. His mind spun. No, this can't be right. This is wrong. They misunderstood. But the chamber around him stirred. The silence dissolved into a wave of murmurs. The Zirthi spoke softly among themselves, their voices like wind through crystal towers. Heads nodded, eyes glowed faintly, and Jonas could feel the shift in the room. Acceptance. Agreement. They believed it. Jonas's heart slammed against his ribs. He opened his mouth to protest, but no sound came. He forced the words out at last, broken and weak. Wait. No, I didn't mean. But the chamber swallowed his voice. The Zirthi did not look at him with confusion, nor with anger. Instead, they looked at him with solemnity, as though he had spoken something sacred, something binding. Lyra stepped forward. Her movement was graceful, each step echoing softly in the chamber. She stopped only a few feet away, close enough that Jonas could see the shifting hues in her skin, like moonlight playing across water. Her gaze met his, calm yet heavy, as if she were weighing not only his words, but the very core of who he was. Your thought was pure, the eldest continued. It was not shielded. It was spoken in the chamber of truth, and it was heard by many. Jonas shook his head, panic rising. It wasn't a proposal. It was just admiration. But the eldest's expression did not change. His voice echoed again. Among us, admiration spoken with such strength is never empty. It is a call, a choosing, a vow. Jonas felt cold all over. A vow. That was what they thought he had made. His simple human wonder had been turned into something sacred among them, something binding. He wanted to stand, to shout, to force them to understand. But his legs felt like stone, and the weight of their eyes held him pinned in place. And then, Lyra spoke. Her voice was softer than the elders, but it carried farther, touched deeper. The vow has been made. I have heard it. My people have heard it. To deny it now would be to dishonor not only me, but all who witness. Jonas's chest tightened. She wasn't angry, but there was a firmness in her words, a quiet strength that gave him no escape. He wanted to scream, but I didn't mean it. Yet the truth stabbed him in the same breath. He had meant it. He had thought it with every piece of his heart, even if only for a fleeting moment. The council murmured again, voices overlapping, some solemn, some approving. The sound was like waves crashing gently against stone. Jonas couldn't catch their words, but he didn't need to. The mood in the chamber had shifted completely. It was no longer a negotiation. It was a ceremony. He felt Lyra's gaze burn into him, not cruel, not even demanding. Just steady, as if she were asking him a question without words. As if the choice was his, yet at the same time, not his at all. Jonas's breath trembled. He had not come here for this. He was supposed to talk about trade, about cooperation, about peace. He was supposed to represent humanity, and instead, with one stray thought, he had somehow declared himself hers, proposed. The word echoed in his skull like a hammer striking over and over. His skin burned with shame, his heart twisted with confusion, and yet, buried deep beneath the panic, something else stirred. A spark. Because when he looked at her, standing proud and calm before him, when he thought of the way her eyes had brushed against his mind, the spark whispered a terrible, undeniable truth. If this is what they call a vow, maybe it is not so far from what I truly feel. Jonas felt like the walls were closing in. The glow of the crystal chamber pressed against him, too bright, too sharp. The murmurs of the Zirthi council were not angry, but approving. Soft voices layered together like music. Yet to him it felt like a cage, each sound tightening around his throat. He tried again, his voice cracking. I wasn't making a vow. You don't understand, among humans a thought like that, it's nothing serious, it's just admiration. But no one moved. No one believed him. One of the younger counselors tilted her head, silver skin shimmering faintly. Among us, admiration is never just. It is the seed of union. To think with such fire, before witnesses, is to bind the self to another. Jonas's chest ached. But I didn't know your ways. I didn't mean to bind myself to anyone. For the first time, a ripple of discomfort passed through the room. The voices quieted. The youngest of them looked away, but the eldest only narrowed his glowing eyes. Intent does not erase truth. The vow has been made. Denial would bring shame to the voice and insult to the council. Shame. Insult. The words hit Jonas like stones. He wanted to argue, to stand up, to demand they listen to what he meant, not what they believed. But then he saw Lyra's face. She had not flinched, had not spoken against him, had not even frowned. She only stood tall and calm, her eyes resting on him with an expression he could not read. There was no anger there, no disappointment, but neither was there relief. Her gaze was steady, unbroken, as if she had expected this all along. And then something brushed his thoughts again. Not heavy, not invasive, just the faintest whisper at the edge of his mind. Do not struggle. You will shame us both. The words weren't spoken. They were felt. They slipped into him like a breath of cold air, leaving him trembling. He looked up at her, eyes wide. She didn't move, didn't change expression, but he knew it had come from her. Lyra was speaking to him, directly, silently, mind to mind. His mouth went dry. Shame us both. The weight of it sank into him. If he fought against this, if he tried to deny what they believed, he wouldn't only humiliate himself. He would disgrace her before her people. The woman who carried the title of chosen voice, the leader of their peace talks, the one who had treated him with patience and dignity. He would stain her honor. Jonas's stomach twisted. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't wanted this. All he had done was think a thought, a private human thought, and now it had grown into something larger than him, larger than anything he could control. And yet, part of him remembered the spark. That tiny spark he had felt when the council declared his words a vow, that whisper inside him that said, maybe it isn't so far from the truth. He pressed his hands together, fingers trembling. His voice failed. His throat closed up and the words withered before they reached his tongue. What could he say? If he denied them, he would dishonor her. If he accepted, he would bind himself to something he barely understood. Both choices felt like stepping off a cliff. The chamber seemed to wait for him, every shining pair of eyes fixed on his small human form, as if the weight of two civilizations rested on his fragile shoulders. He felt so small, so terribly, impossibly small. Jonas lowered his head, unable to meet their stares. His thoughts churned, like storm clouds. Fear pressed against him, but beneath it, shame burned hotter. Shame that he had stumbled into this mess. Shame that he couldn't find the courage to speak. And somewhere beneath the shame, the tiniest flicker of something. Else not love, not yet, but recognition. The sense that Lyra was not only beautiful, but vast. Vast in her calm, vast in her strength, vast in the way she carried her people's trust like a crown upon her shoulders. He had called her beautiful, and he had meant it. But what he was beginning to see now went beyond beauty, and that made the silence, her silence, even heavier. Jonas closed his eyes, fighting to steady his breath. He had come here to build peace between two species. But instead, with one thought, he had entangled himself with her in ways no treaty could untangle. And though he didn't yet understand how, he knew nothing would ever be the same again. That night, the chamber of judgment faded into silence, but the storm inside Jonas's chest refused to rest. He sat alone in his guest quarters, a room grown from pale crystal walls that shimmered faintly with their own light. No lamps, no fire, no shadows, just a soft glow that never dimmed, like the heartbeat of the building itself. Jonas sat on the edge of the strange bed, his hands gripping the edge until his knuckles whitened. He could not stop replaying the words in his head. The human has proposed. His stomach twisted. He had not meant it. He had not spoken it. And yet somehow the Zerthi had taken his thought and woven it into something sacred, a vow, a bond, a promise. How could one careless thought carry so much weight? How could his small, clumsy heart shake the counsel of an ancient people? Jonas buried his face in his hands. He had come here for peace, for treaties, for humanity's future. Instead, he had tied himself to something he didn't understand, tied not only himself but her, and it was her face that haunted him the most. Lyra, chosen voice, calm and unreadable as she stood before the council. She had not scolded him, not mocked him, not even looked surprised. Instead, she had told him quietly inside his head, "Do not struggle. You will shame us both." That whisper cut deeper than any blade. The sound of the door sliding open pulled him from his thoughts. Jonas jerked his head up, and there she was. Lyra stepped inside without ceremony. She wore no glowing robes now, only a simple garment of silver cloth that flowed down her form. Her hair, if it could be called hair, shimmered faintly like strands of light. In the quiet of the room, she seemed less an untouchable ambassador and more a person. Jonas stood too quickly, nearly stumbling. "Ambassador, I mean, Lyra, She raised a hand, silencing him. Her steps were quiet against the crystal floor as she moved closer, until the distance between them was no more than a breath. Her eyes, those pools of liquid glass, studied him with an intensity that made his throat dry. For a long moment she said nothing. The silence stretched, heavy but not hostile. Jonas's heart hammered against his ribs, waiting, fearing. Finally, her voice came soft but sharp as a blade. "Human Jonah, did you mean it?" The question struck him harder than the council's declaration. He swallowed, his mouth dry. He wanted to deny it, to shake his head, to explain it all away as a mistake. That would have been easier. That would have freed him. But her eyes would not let him. Those eyes did not demand obedience. They did not command him like the elder's voice had. They simply waited, patient, as though she already knew the answer, but needed to hear it from his own lips. Jonas's chest ached. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Yes, I meant it." The words felt like pulling stones from his throat, but once spoken they settled heavy in the air, unmovable. He stumbled to add, "But not as a proposal, not as your people believe. Among humans, it is only wonder, only admiration. I didn't mean to make it into something greater." Lyra tilted her head slightly. The soft light of the room glimmered across her silver skin. Her silence lingered for a long time until Jonas wondered if she would leave him unanswered. But at last, she spoke again, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Among us, there is no difference. To see someone with wonder is to choose them. To speak it with truth is to bind yourself." Jonas felt the ground tilt beneath him, his chest tightened. "But I don't understand your ways. I don't even know what it means to bind myself like that." Her eyes softened. Not pity, not judgment, but something quieter. "It means you carry me in your thoughts. That is enough." Jonas's lips parted, but no words came. He wanted to tell her he wasn't ready, that he couldn't carry something so heavy. But the truth caught in his throat, because part of him knew, deep down in the place where thoughts escaped without permission, that she was already there. Lyra turned toward the door, her silver form framed by the soft glow of the crystal walls. She paused, looking back at him once more. "You are not wrong to fear," she said softly, "but fear does not erase truth." And then she was gone, leaving Jonas alone once more, his heart louder than ever in the silence. Jonas could not sleep. He lay on the strange bed, staring at the ceiling of living crystal that glowed with a soft, silver light. No matter how he turned, no matter how tightly he closed his eyes, the light seemed to seep through his eyelids and pull him back into wakefulness. But it wasn't really the light keeping him awake. It was everything else. His mind spun in endless circles. The words of the elder still echoed like iron bells in his skull. The human has proposed. He had never felt so powerless in his life. One thought, just one, had been taken, reshaped, and carried by the voices of the Zirthi until it no longer belonged to him. It belonged to them. To her. He pressed his palms against his eyes, groaning quietly. He wanted to believe this could all be fixed with explanation, with reason. That if he just found the right words, If he explained human ways carefully enough, the council would understand. They would see it was all a mistake. But then he remembered Lyra's whisper in his mind. "Do not struggle. You will shame us both." Her voice haunted him more than anything. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cold. It was steady. Certain. She had spoken not only for herself, but for him too, binding their fates together whether he wanted it or not. Jonas turned onto his side, clutching the edge of the blanket. What am I supposed to do? He thought of Earth again, of the cities lit by neon and firelight, of the crowded streets, of his family waiting by the television to hear updates from this historic mission. He thought of the leaders who had trusted him, even, if only by accident, to stand where no other human had stood. What would they say if they knew their envoy had proposed? By accident? To an alien leader? The shame tightened like a knot inside him. But beneath the shame was something else. Something softer. Something more dangerous. Because when he remembered Lyra's face, when he remembered the way her mind had brushed against his, he felt not only fear, not only guilt. He felt awe. She was unlike anyone he had ever known. Not just in form, though her beauty had struck him so deeply that his thought had escaped, but in presence. She carried herself like a storm trapped in glass, calm yet powerful. She did not need to raise her voice to be heard. She did not need to demand respect to command it. When she stood before her people, she was the center of the world. And yet when she had come to him in private, she had not looked like a storm. She had looked human, quiet, honest, asking him a question that had shaken him more than all the council's judgment. Did you mean it? He had answered yes. The memory twisted inside him. He had told the truth, but the truth felt heavier now than any lie. Jonas sat up, running a hand through his hair. He felt torn in two. One part of him screamed to run, to fight against this mistake, until he was free. The other part whispered to stop struggling, to accept, to trust the pull he felt toward her. The war inside his chest made it hard to breathe. What if I ruin everything? He whispered to himself. His voice cracked in the empty room. What if I'm not strong enough? What if I can't be what they think I am? The silence gave him no answer. He lay back down, exhausted but restless. His eyes burned with the weight of tears he would not let fall. He had not cried in years, but tonight he came close. Not just from fear, but from the crushing sense that his life was no longer his own. And yet, even in that despair, the spark returned. The same spark that had flickered when the council named his thought a vow. The same spark that whispered, maybe, just maybe, this was not a mistake. Jonas closed his eyes, holding the spark like a fragile flame in the storm of his heart. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. He did not know if he would have the courage to face it. But he knew one thing with aching certainty. He could not forget her. Not her voice, not her presence, not the way her eyes had looked into him as if they already knew the answer he feared to give. And that truth, whether blessing or curse, would not let him sleep. The council chamber was filled once more. Jonas stood at the center, his palms damp, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure they could hear it. The walls of crystal glowed brighter than before, alive with shifting light, as if the chamber itself understood that this moment carried more weight than any before it. All around him, the Zerthi sat in their high seats, tall and silent, their eyes gleaming like moons. They did not speak. They waited, and at the far end stood Lyra. She wore the violet and silver robes of the chosen voice once again. But to Jonas, she no longer looked untouchable. He had seen her in quiet, in shadow, in honesty. Now, he saw both sides, the leader and the person beneath. And together, they terrified him. The elder rose. His voice boomed through the chamber like thunder through glass. Human Jonas, you stand before us in the place of truth. You have spoken with fire. You have called the voice with wonder. The vow has been heard. Do you accept what you have declared? The question was final, heavy. There would be no chance to twist or bargain. This was the moment. Jonas's throat was dry. He wanted to run. He wanted to tell them again that it was a mistake, that humans did not mean thoughts the way the Zirthi did. He wanted to free himself from the weight pressing on his chest. But when he looked at Lyra, all those words withered in his mouth. She stood calm, her glass-like eyes locked on him. She did not beg. She did not demand. She only waited, just as she had the night before when she had asked him the hardest question of his life. Did you mean it? And the truth was still there, burning inside him. Yes, he had meant it. Jonas swallowed hard, his hands trembling. He stepped forward, his voice shaking but louder than he expected. I did not understand your ways when I came here. I thought my words were only thoughts, only human admiration. But I see now that my heart spoke louder than I knew, and I cannot deny it. The chamber stirred, the Zirthi whispering softly, voices like wind through the halls. Jonas turned his eyes to Lyra, his chest aching with fear, and something stronger. I am only human. I am small. I am clumsy. I may never be enough to stand beside you, but still, if you will have me, then yes, I choose you. The words left him shaking, but once spoken, he felt the weight shift. Not lighter, not yet, but steadier, like he had set his feet on solid ground for the first time. The elder's eyes glowed brighter. It is done. The council's voices rose together, a chorus of sound that rang through the crystal walls. It was not a cheer, not a shout, but a solemn music, low and powerful, carrying the weight of approval. Lyra stepped forward, her robe flowing like liquid light. She stopped before Jonas, closer than she had ever stood in the council's presence. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and placed her hand on his. Her skin was cool, smooth, steady. Her voice brushed against his mind, gentle as a whisper. You have chosen, and so have I. Jonas's eyes stung. He had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. Yet for the first time he did not feel small. With her hand in his, with her voice in his mind, he felt whole. The chamber glowed brighter, as if the very walls celebrated their union. The chorus of the Zirthi faded into silence once more, but it was no longer the silence of judgment. It was the silence of acceptance. Jonas looked up at Lyra, and she looked back at him, not as ambassador to envoy, not as alien to human, but as two souls who had spoken a truth neither could take back. And for the first time since stepping into this strange crystal world, Jonas smiled. He had made a mistake. But that mistake had become his truth, and standing hand in hand with her, he knew it was a truth he would never regret. That's part 7, around 700 words. The climax and emotional resolution, with Jonas embracing the vow and finding strength in it.